Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palomba. Now, today we're going to be going through focus groups. Focus groups are a kind of qualitative method in which we try to get a greater sense of how consumers appreciate or engage a particular good or service. This may include the kinds of TV shows people watch, the kinds of movies people watch. It may also include the kind of household products people use. And so a focus group is meant to really create insights through some sort of group dynamic. That's really what we're worried about here as moderators or aspiring moderators. Moderators really do help create that group dynamic. And really what a focus group is reliant on is one moderator, usually the researcher, him or herself, and a group of others, usually 6 to 10 people, who are in a room having a conversation. And I've been very fortunate to be a moderator on projects for WWE, for Bravo, and for a few others as well. And so when I do these focus groups and I get a sense of what or how people are perceiving something, the goal for me is to say really as little as possible, because ultimately the goal is to establish a group dynamic. Now, a group dynamic occurs when you have conversation really kind of zigzagging across the table. So the goal is I don't have to push David or Kelly or Joanna to speak. That really they're kind of riffing off each other about some sort of topic I might bring up. It could be about reality television. It could be about the horror genre in video games. It could be about many, many different things. But if we can kind of establish that, then it feels organic, right? Conversation feels organic. It feels great. When we have that milieu, that environment, we're really able to poke and investigate into the deep recesses of other people's minds. If we think about it, not everybody is thinking about reality television all the time. So during a focus group, we also have to kind of guide our participants by the hand, so to speak, to make sure that we're bringing them toward where we want them to be in the conversation. As we go through this particular lecture, I want you to think about where we start in a focus group and how we end. Generally speaking, it's kind of that upside down triangle. That's how a triangle looks. An upside down triangle in which you start very general with the topic itself. I'm not going to start talking about the Jersey Shore family vacation in a focus group. I'm probably going to start with a few questions first about reality television. You wouldn't just throw somebody into the ocean, I hope. And so we have to be very careful in the way in which we get people slowly to start thinking about a topic. We don't throw people in the water. We have to slowly get them there through carefully constructed questions along a conceptual plane. Let's get started with the first slide. And so qualitative research in the academic industry is still very much relied upon heavily for plots. And so typically, a lot of qualitative research is held in Los Angeles, but content is tested all over the United States. In fact, I was recently talking to somebody at Bravo, and I was told that they were running focus groups in Baltimore, Boston, and New York City. And that is why I specifically have those cities listed on this slide. But why? Why should it matter that Baltimore and Boston and New York City have focus groups? Can't you just do focus groups anywhere? The truth is that culture is vastly different across those cities, agreeably so, right? Those of you who have traveled to other cities in the United States, there really is no other city like New York City. You could even make the case for Boston. You might even be able to make the case for Baltimore. And so it is important really to pick up all of the preferences and tastes and perspectives these cities may have. Now, additionally, Bravo as a reality-based reality television channel really does rely on architecture around a city, right, for one of its shows. Real Housewives of Orange County, Real Housewives of New Jersey, Real Housewives of Atlanta. And so it's very crucial and important that for shows like Southern Charm, which is in Charleston, South Carolina, that they really look at these cities closely, because some of these cities may not also offer insights, but may be good nesting grounds for future shows. And so it's really important to remember qualitative research really does depend upon not only the kind of research that you do, but also where you do it. That's a little bit different than quantitative research in that regard. There was one thing that really struck me when I was studying brand management during my PhD. There was a line in a textbook that I'll share with all of you. It said something along the lines of that, tastes and preferences vary from city to city, and people in New York City tend to be overly opinionated, so researchers should take note of that. So it's really funny to note that even researchers writing textbooks, writing brand management textbooks, note that for research you have to be careful where you conduct it. Let's move along. So what is a focus group? I alluded to this earlier. It is a method involving at least 6 to 10 participants, and your goal is to create and generate a group dynamic. You are interested in creating energy and interest in an area. You're attempting to draw many insights and opinions, but remember, as the moderator, you are just navigating the conversation along. You should not be sharing your opinions with your participants. You really shouldn't be doing much of anything. You are there to make sure a conversation continues and to stoke and energize the conversation when necessary. Let's move along. Industry uses, I alluded to this also earlier, new product and service development. Now, as firms become more driven toward artificial intelligence, deep learning, and machine learning, and big data collection, how and where focus groups may be used may shift, but traditionally, they've been very, very good in testing products, services, and conducting concept testing. And I have spoken to several people in the field right now working in television, and they still do believe focus groups will have a place with these particular items, because ultimately, you want to be sure that people will like something. And you also want to get a sense of how people are feeling. And sometimes data collection, even big data collection, can't necessarily tell us how people are thinking. They can tell us what people are doing, but they usually can't, or the kind of data collection that I'm referencing, usually can't tell us what people are thinking. So it does provide insights as well into communications or particular campaigns. This is for your advertising and public relations folks out there. Focus groups are wonderful if you're testing a political campaign, if you're testing a public relations campaign, perhaps by Honda about what they're doing for climate change prevention. Or you could test advertising commercials for EA Sports or Coca-Cola or Nike or any of those companies. And so focus groups are really, really useful in just getting a sense of people's reactions. Let's move along. Cons of focus groups. Unfortunately, there are issues with focus groups. For one, cost. Cost alone is fairly high with a focus group. Now, in New York City, which is where this show is just a stone's throw away from, the cost of asking a David, a Keith, a Jennifer, a Leanne, if you will, to come into a focus group is usually about $100 to $200. That's for an hour to an hour and a half of participation. A focus group usually lasts from about an hour to an hour and a half. Generally, focus group participants are there for probably about 2 hours. Additionally, personality of participants is important. You actually may need to screen your participants really to do a focus group well. It's important to be able to do that. You want to make sure that people are talkative. You want to make sure that people have something to contribute. You want to make sure that people actually like what they say they like in a form. So, for instance, what I usually do is I'll have a questionnaire sent out, and it'll ask students who I usually run focus groups with, do you watch these particular shows? If they do, they may be invited in. If they don't, they may be placed in a focus group full of people who don't watch Southern Charm or Vanderpump Rules, for instance. And so the third bullet here is it really is dependent on the skill and insight of the moderator. Now, in any kind of good focus group, you should have a moderator who knows what they're doing, a moderator who is experienced, a moderator who is seasoned. I personally have run, I believe, over 20 focus groups at this point, so I feel pretty good about what I can do as a particular researcher. Additionally, I have insights. Because my area of research is media business and entertainment marketing, I am plugged into what's going on. And because I publish in this area, I have an expertise that I can kind of bring into any focus group situation surrounding entertainment marketing. So that makes me valuable when I'm conducting focus groups for companies. Fourth, you want to be sure that the sample is representative of the population. You may not always have it though. You may have people in your focus group that really aren't representative of the population you're going for. You know, we really wanted huge brand loyalists of Nickelodeon, but I could only really get people who watch Nickelodeon only about 2 times a week. Okay, it's something, but that may hamstring or hamper my own results and really what insights I can pull from them. Let's move along. The focus group design itself. First, it is important to identify the problem. What's the issue? What do you want to know? You really can't go anywhere without doing this first. You absolutely need to know what you want to investigate. Remember, focus groups are predicated on research questions. They're predicated on asking. And so you need to be curious. You need to ask about something. 2, you need to select a sample. You need to be sure who your sample is going to be. Usually for me, I have 2 focus groups for a particular channel. So it might be 2 focus groups of people who watch Bravo, for instance, and then 1 focus group with people who don't watch Bravo. That's usually how I've kind of constructed these focus group projects that I've conducted for Bravo, WWE, and others. And so that's generally a good model, right? You want to see what people think about the service or product that is under investigation. But then it's really good to get people in who don't know Bravo, who don't use Nike, who don't use Adidas, because it gives you insight into why they don't, and then maybe what you can do to get them to use those products and services. The goal is topic saturation. Topic saturation. That's this idea that you should run enough focus groups to get a sense of what's going on. Generally speaking, running 3 to 5 focus groups is probably the sweet spot. Additionally, you should be finding similar things in your focus groups. And so when you get to the team project at the end of the semester, you'll see this because each of you will be running the same focus group with the same set of questions, but you'll have different participants. The goal is that each of you finds similar things, right? It's a good thing that if all of you are asking the same questions about ESPN in a focus group, that Jonathan found the same thing as Michael, as Kevin, as David, as Melissa, and as Fran. And if that's the case, all 6 of you then are finding similar things that people are saying. That's good. That means that you're finding themes. Now, a theme, as you look through transcripts or as you listen back to focus groups, is something that appears throughout each focus group session. So if Jonathan hears something about ESPN really should put more content out there that's smartphone ready, and Michael hears that in his focus group, and Melissa hears that in her focus group, well, then we have a theme now, don't we? Something keeps coming up with the consumers we're talking to about this issue. This is something to note. And so be sure that you are looking out for patterns as you conduct your own focus groups. Let's move along. Trusting the findings. As you can see, this little cute pug is a little insecure about the findings. Focus group findings are difficult to generalize. We really can't generalize them. It's difficult to ensure reliability here, otherwise known as replicability here. And so it's tough because focus groups typically aren't randomized, right? There's no randomized sample. We're finding people through some sort of purpose of selection who watch ESPN or TNT or something else. And so that's one issue here. I don't know that if I run the focus group with these set of people, or this set of people, that I'm going to find the same throughout. So that's a little bit difficult to do, for sure. 2, the skill set of the moderator should include controlling the group and fostering a group dynamic. And so that's important too. You need a moderator who is skilled and comfortable in controlling the group and fostering a group dynamic. You need a moderator who's friendly, generous, gregarious, who is able to also ensure that people don't talk over each other, that we don't have people who are quiet, and that we don't have people who monopolize the conversation, right? The last thing we need is in a group of 5 to have one person talking and everybody else not really contributing. If possible, there should be a pre-test of the focus group itself, and the interview guide really should be used in multiple studies. This is a way to ensure that the focus group guide is replicable, that you can kind of see what findings are being sussed out or teased out as this has been used. And so I do recommend, if you have the time, to pre-test the focus group. How do you do that? You run one more focus group. So if you're going to run 3 focus groups, run 4 instead, and use the first focus group you run as a pre-test. Just see if people understand the questions. See how people respond. See if people are confused or don't really know what you're talking about. I usually try to run 4 for that reason, because I know the first focus group is going to be a little bit weird, a little bit odd, and it's way easier for me to be able to just do the focus groups and see how it feels. And then I know the second, third, and fourth will be all that much better. Let's move along. Ensuring accuracy. As I mentioned earlier, saturation is super important as a primary goal. Triangulation is a really great way to ensure accuracy. We do triangulation in this media research class because at the end of the semester, that group project will entail a survey and a focus group. And so you are doing triangulation because you're using mixed methods here to make sure you're finding the same things. Other things that you can do to ensure accuracy in your focus groups include members check. Believe it or not, some focus group researchers will put out a report of the results and findings and send them back to the actual participants who participated in those focus groups. The researcher will ask them, what do you think? Did I nail it? Are these the things that you guys are really feeling? Second, you can do some sort of audit. And so you can have other researchers look at your work to see if in the focus groups and in the recordings that they would have the same perceptions or the same conclusions or the same insights about what kind of data was collected there. Also, the last thing you can do is just have a research team. Don't be the only moderator or don't be the only researcher. Maybe you moderate all the groups just to kind of keep things consistent, but you have another researcher with you. These are some things that we can do to ensure accuracy in a focus group project. Let's move along. So the formulation of a focus group guide. We've talked enough about a focus group. What about the focus group interview guide? Well, generally speaking, a focus group interview guide consists of about 20 to 25 questions. Now, I have been asked to ask upwards of 30 questions in an hour to an hour and a half. As you ladies and gentlemen might imagine, there really is no way to do that. And so it's very difficult because companies, and when you get into industry, this will happen too. Companies will approach you about shoving and stuffing as many questions in a survey and as many questions in a focus group guide as possible. Don't freak out. It's normal. They just want to try to get their money's worth. You need to be attentive as moderators during your focus group. You may be able to skip over questions. Your participants may answer questions that you have later on that you can skip through, so it's really important that you know your interview guide intimately. The focus group should be structured by beginning with introductions and shared experiences. You really should have an icebreaker. So the first portion of your focus group guide should be an intro, introducing yourself, introducing the study. I wouldn't talk about the study a lot because it will bias your participants, and you don't really want that. You want to try to avoid that at all costs. Because then you may have some sort of response bias going on in which participants are giving you what they think you want to hear, which is not the point of really any kind of research for that matter. And so after you've introduced yourself, the study briefly, not going into details, we can then have an icebreaker. State your name, your major, or, what kind of job do you have, where do you live, just general questions that are kind of easy and fun and free-flowing, just to get people to start talking. The structure of these questions. Now, you will have a focus group interview guide attached to this lecture. It is an old one that I have from when I did some work with Bravo. It'll help give you an idea of what a focus group guide should look like. Certainly there are variations, but I think it'll really help crystallize all of the things that I'm talking about here. So the structure of the questions. You really should try to shape each question to ask why or how. If I ask you, do you wear red sweaters, and you tell me no, was that really a good question? Well, no. It didn't really tell me anything. Great, you don't wear red sweaters. But if I ask, how do you select what color sweater to wear, that's more interesting, isn't it? I can pull more from my participants. So why and how really do aid us in asking provocative questions that will elicit responses. Remember, the purpose of a focus group is to uncover. You're hoping to uncover something. You're hoping to learn about something. Think about your girlfriend or think about your best friend when you ask them why they're still dating that guy. You don't ask them if they're still dating Brian. That doesn't give you anything. You ask them, why are you still dating Brian? He's a slob. He's a cheat. He's a liar, right? Why and how? That is the way to ask questions. And in general, a focus group should be a funnel. So as I said earlier, you want to start asking general questions and then get to specific questions. Generally speaking, what fashion brands do you typically buy? Or what kinds of athletic gear do you like to wear when you're hiking? Then I can start asking them about how they prepare for a hike using Land's End clothes or LL Bean. Or then I can ask, people about what they use or what they purchase when they visit a Gucci store, right, for the fashion question. Or for the fashion project. So the goal here really is to think about your topic and then start from general to specific. If I'm interested in how people shop for coffee brands, or if they like certain coffee brands, or how they like to make their coffee, I can start by saying, how do you drink coffee typically during the week, right? Just generally speaking. Then I can work my way down to how people drink in the morning, maybe what they put in their coffee in the morning. Do they drink coffee in the afternoon, right? That's how you really want to think about this. General to specific. Let's move along. The role of the moderator. The role of the moderator is supposed to facilitate and guide the conversation. He should, or she should, ensure a lively discussion. You want to be sure that the discussion is lively. You want to be sure that it is interesting. You want to be sure that people are engaged. Now, you may be running focus groups in the future for people who have survived brain cancer or lung cancer. You can still have a lively discussion with those morose, sad, depressing topics. You absolutely can. But as the moderator, you set the tone. When people come into the conference room, when I'm running a focus group, it's about entertainment. I'm there to have fun. And so I eagerly greet people. Hi, how are you? My name is Anthony. Thank you so much for being here. People like that. People like that a lot. People like being thanked. Think how often people are thanked. When was the last time you were thanked for anything? It doesn't happen that often. And so I can set that tone. However, I can also say, listen, thank you very much. This is a really important topic that we're trying to conduct more research on. I recognize this is sensitive, but you're exceptionally brave for coming forward to talk to us today about your own struggle with cancer. That's just as good. I think you're going to have a lively discussion. It may not be happy, but there will be energy behind it. So that's still okay. You also want to be sure that you ask key follow-up questions. If I'm listening to Darnell and Darnell says to me, yeah, I really like Dunkin' Donuts coffee, but I find myself always buying Starbucks coffee because of my sister. That's interesting. I would absolutely ask a follow-up question to that. I'd probably say, oh, to what extent does your sister have influence over where you purchase coffee? Or why does your sister have influence over your own coffee consumption? He may say to me then, well, we actually live near a Starbucks, and the Starbucks is actually on the way to her elementary school, so she kind of prefers to go there to get a juice. And so I wind up buying coffee there. That's a really interesting insight I probably wouldn't have gained without asking. That's a really interesting piece of data. Additionally, you should always follow up on interesting comments. And that's kind of similar to asking key follow-up questions, but you do want to be mindful of that. You also want to work to make sure no one sabotages or hijacks the conversation. You can do this in a few ways. You can say, oh, listen, Helen, we really do appreciate your comments here, and you've been wonderful so far in this focus group. I just want to make sure that Jose and Daniel get an opportunity to speak as well. You can do it that way. Or you can say, hey, Sylvia, we really haven't heard from you. What do you think of the new Avengers movie? Right? You can call on people in a focus group. Feel free to do so. Sylvia, what do you think of Honda right now in its current campaign for climate change? What do you currently think of the Democratic candidates for 2020? You can pick out people and you can ask them questions, especially if you notice people getting quiet. You really should encourage all to share opinions. We do that in the introduction. You'll see in my focus group interview guide. I try to push it toward that. And then you want to circle back to focus if the conversation begins to drift. As you can see with focus groups, they're fairly complex. You're managing people and you're making sure that you pursue the topic itself. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.